In order to understand our lives, putting into context our experiences, out of which we can formulate plans, strategies and decisions and so on, we need a model, we need a narrative, we need to work out what is our backstory. And most people take on that which is given by parents and society as the way to live. You get a job, you get married, you have kids, you do as you're told, you pay your taxes, you get ill for a few years at the end of your life and you die, and that's it. Well, no, that just doesn't work for me. I won't accept that. And there's that beautiful part of my personality which I enjoy and praise all of the time, where I just won't conform. There's a rebel within me, and I'm so very pleased that there is. It's uncomfortable being a rebel, but I spend most of my time talking to rebels. Most of my clients are rebels, and we know who we are, don't we? We don't play this game that's been constructed with a set of rules that A, we don't understand, B, are not explained, and C, work for those who set the rules, the rich and the powerful. No, I won't play. Not my kind of game, that's set up at the beginning so that I'm bound to lose if I play by their rules. I knew that when I was quite young. I think I got that when I was about 18 or something. There's a certain wisdom in me at 18 that I don't think I've returned to quite yet. And one of the things I kind of knew at 18 was that you have to have a bit of paper that says, I can do this, I'm worth something, I'm a valid person. And that bit of paper, in my case, turned out to be an accountancy qualification. So I knew I had to get that bit of paper. And so I invested 5 years of my life doing something I can't say that I enjoyed very much, in order that I would then always have work. So I worked that out very young, and that was a tremendous advantage for me. But the second thing that you need, I think, is this narrative, because it looks like we're living in a lunatic asylum. This world that we live in, it's just like, it can't possibly be the right way to live. And if you don't get that intuitively, then I don't know why you're watching these videos. We're intuitive. And those of us that trust that intuition develop the intuition. And when the intuition says, I don't know about that, then it's probably wrong. When the intuition says, yes, that's definitely right, I don't understand why, but it's definitely what I want to do next, it's probably right. So I did trust that. And I trusted that rather more than I trusted the logic, the rationale, the explanations that people gave me. And I think that was a component of the highest order in my quest to be free. And I think a rebel is motivated by this quest to be free. Personal freedom is a really strong motivator. And so in the final analysis, that freedom comes from the understanding that free will is universal and eternal. That means there is no particular moment in your whole soul's life which is not your responsibility, your creative expression, your evolutionary advantage. Each moment, not only now, but also after I've died and forever, it's my business what I do next. It's my business what I perceive. It's my business what feelings I give my attention to, and nobody else's. Now this is so counterintuitive, so against the teachings that we've been brought up to, that it's hard to affirm that, but we do need to affirm it. And what I'm saying is that freedom is a claim that we make. Now that claim takes the form of this narrative. Now, I've made up a narrative that explains pretty much all that I've experienced and all that I want to experience in the future. And that narrative can only really be properly understood if it includes the component of soul. So I've an identity of my soul. I give my soul a name. I call my soul Sophius. And I'm aware that when my soul incarnated, it lost its integrity of self-identification considerably. So my model for incarnation and that kind of thing is that unity is, God exists as an electromagnetic life force. So you could equate God and life as synonyms. I don't think it's appropriate to say God is love. I think that's bad logic. If A equals B, then B equals A. That's logic. If God is love, then love is God. Have you ever seen a loving person that's not behaving in a godlike way? Yes. So love is not entirely God, it's something else going on as well. So it can't be an equation, that's my logic. But life, yeah, everything in life, every feeling, thought, action, everything is an expression or something of life. Life is an expression of life. Tautology, well, I like that. God's an ontology. That seems to work for me. So I think of God as life itself, and I don't need to get lost in names and gender and stuff like that. So out of that form of electromagnetism that we're calling God, it's not really a form, it's formless. Something having a form arises. And in the first case, that form is minimal. In other words, we wouldn't be able to see it as a form. It's just not unity and different from other things which are also in existence now, which are not unity, such as archangels, if you like. I don't like these words very much, but there exists a first dimension down from unity into towards earth plane reality, and it comes down in stages. And the first stage is the first level of differentiation. And it goes down and down and down and down and down until the slowing down of light takes the form of the astral plane, as we say in Sufism, and that's the mind and the lower emotional body. And then there's a choice we make whether or not to incarnate. So upon incarnation, there's a bifurcation taking place so that bits of the soul spread out across space-time coordinates. Now, in the astral plane, there's no time. Time doesn't exist anywhere but here on Earth, because we need the illusion of time, sequential time, to slow down our attempt to perceive all and everything. In any moment, all and everything is there for us to perceive, but we can't get it all. There's just too much, and we don't have that capacity. So we slow it down and we minimize it by giving our attention to less things than the infinite number that there are, and we give ourselves a lot of time to assimilate those perceptions. So time isn't sequential and real. Neither of those two things, but we see it that way on the earth plane because we need to, because we've got that limitation of consciousness. Now, if time is not like that, if it doesn't exist, then it's silly to think of the reincarnation principle as going forward in time. So you're not reborn as something else in the future. It doesn't work like that, I don't think. I'm pretty sure about this. There's this bifurcation taking place simultaneously, because simultaneous is the only time frame on the astral plane. If time doesn't exist, then everything is simultaneous. So we simultaneously incarnate into many different space-time locations. Let's say arbitrarily 1,000 or 100 or whatever, a lot anyway. Now each of these persons have a life and they die off and they return to be to wait for the rest of them to die off, and they hang about on the astral plane until that happens. So those who haven't yet died, they become more and more the percentage of what is alive. So at some point, if we were 1 in 1,000, we don't really tune into the soul much. But as the things die off, we become 1 in 500, 1 in 100, 1 in a dozen, and eventually we get to feel our other soul siblings, and we become aware of what we start to call past lives. They're not past, but they are lives. They're living beings that have the same soul as we have. And we can become aware of them on a very intimate level, and we can give them stories, and giving them stories helps us in our own story. So I started to create stories from my soul siblings when I was aware of around 12 of them. I didn't come up with this clarity about soul siblings until I got down to 7. When I had 6 other soul siblings and there were 7 of us, I started to get what they were and what they did. And I also noticed that there was a very profound resonance. So all of my soul siblings were resonant with bits of my persona, my personality. So like, for example, one of my soul siblings was a troubadour in the time of the Cathars around the 12th century in France. And I happened to pick up my guitar and sing songs and travel around for a while. And one of my soul siblings was best described as a privateer, quite close to being a pirate. And when I was in business, I was rather that way of thinking. I took rather more than I gave, I think. And so I've got this kind of image of myself spread out. And as those finished their work and realized their life task, they kind of died off as well. And now I'm left with 2 others, so I'm one of 3 soul siblings, and I'm aware of the other 2 very clearly indeed. And I'm aware also that of the 3, I'm best placed to be influential and help whilst we go through this great awakening process that we're approaching. So I'm going to notice at some point that my other soul siblings have passed back to the astral, and I'm going to be thoroughly engaged then with my soul consciousness. And some people call that a walk-in. If a higher consciousness is reached, it kind of walks into your body, and I think that won't happen yet for a while. Maybe around the age of 80, I'll let go of this personality and become a more appropriate vehicle for my soul in total consciousness, and that's when my real work will be done. So I've been spending my life planning and learning and meeting people and working it all out in order that I'm ready, my beingness is ready to adopt or accept the incarnation of my soul as such, in totality. So that's my narrative. And I've got a narrative for what my soul is and does, and it's aligned with a distant planet I call Asterion. And Sophius is quite an important figure in a council of the ruling body of that planet, and well respected for his unique attitude to life, in a way which is bizarrely happening to me. I'm starting to be treated with a level of respect that I've never received before, partly because of these videos, and I find it a bit strange. But I think this is Sophius's influence. I think it's like my soul is starting to find its right place of being, and I think I've done very well for myself in moving to a quiet country location in Ireland, away from all the stress and so on. And the purpose of this video really is to just try and encourage yourselves to create your own narrative. Because I've created a narrative where I'm the hero and the good guy and like, yeah, really somebody to admire. And then I find myself receiving a little bit more of that quality of energy because my narrative is very positive and optimistic and a little bit audacious. But all of a sudden I find myself in that role. And I came to realize quite some years ago that narratives are magical in the true sense of the word, that you create a magical reality within the story that you write, which then comes to pass in some form, not exact, but if you see the narrative as a metaphor for something, it comes to pass. And the narrative that we have for our lives, in my case, I'm writing a story of how to interpret my past events. And some of this can be seen as on my website as my bio. So I've interpreted my life events according to a certain story. And that story is written with a certain level of humor. I'm not taking myself too seriously, or life indeed mustn't be taken too seriously. It's a serious business, but it's even heavier if you take it seriously, you know, serious enough by itself without us adding to the worry and anxiety and heaviness. So we have to be a bit humorous and understand that everything that happens to us is kind of can be taken lightly if you choose to take it lightly, because there's nobody else doing it but ourselves. All of our events, all of the nasty things that happen to us, it didn't happen to us. We happened that to ourselves. And as soon as you get that, then you realize what a fool you are making these horrible things happen. And you're going to laugh because you're so stupid. And that's a good exercise for a while. And you kind of realize, actually, not necessary. You don't have to have these bad things happening if you write your story differently. And so like, I was very lucky to kind of work this out at a young enough age that I could do something about it. So I started to write my story, my narrative, the way I would want it to unfold. And now I'm happier than I was. I encourage you to sort of write your own narratives, therefore, and not only to do that in the written form, the way I've done it with my bio on my website, as a kind of almost an attempt at a novel halfway between those two things. Do that by all means. I find that extraordinarily empowering. But the point is, the real narrative, the real story that you're writing, the one that really matters, comes out of your mouth. It's the words that you use. And most people don't work that out properly, ever. My job in life is to listen to people, really listen, and notice what they say, and then point out that that's negative, that's contradictory, that's going around in a circle. That's my job, is to point out what people are doing with their words and how that has created the circumstances of their lives that are suboptimal. The story that I have to deal with all of the time is the same one. There's only one story that we're living out, it seems to me. Now, I know this is hyperbole and is probably an exaggeration, but it's really useful. The story goes like this. Parents don't know how to do their job properly, so we get brought up wrongly on a very serious level, and we don't heal that ever, really. That becomes the distortion of light, which is our personality. And we don't live perfectly. We enact that in all of the imperfections in our life until we do something to heal some of it and we get a little bit better. And then we kind of eventually learn to understand that we created it all and we can create it differently by claiming the power and clarity to do that. And the most effective way to do that is to learn how to speak properly. By which I mean, say positive things. It is that simple. If you talk up your life as a positive thing, that will attract the circumstances to mirror the words that you're using. And we're trained, so profoundly trained, to be humbled. Not humble, but humbled. And self-deprecating and so on. We're trained by society. The priests started it, and it just continued from there. Be less than me. The linguistic properties of the word blessing. Be less than me. And we can't tell you what God said because you're too stupid. We've got the Bible. We can read the Bible and you can't, That kind of authority, that power of the church has ruined our capacity to understand the nature of God. It's really destroyed our thinking capacity in terms of clarity of logic as well. If the internet is added into that equation, then whatever capacity we have for clear thinking before the internet is almost lost nowadays. People just don't know how to think square and straight. And so they don't know how to live square and straight. Everything's a mess for most people. And worse than that, it's a negative mess. Most people come up with this narrative in their head and they speak it into the world repetitively, which is self-contradictory. It can't possibly work that way. It just doesn't check out as a story. It's negative. It's self-blaming. All of these things, this is totally normal. This is not the exception. This is pretty much a certainty when I meet a new client. That's the certainty. I'm going to have to deal with something of this type. And the answer really is very simple. Talk your life up positively. Speak only positive words. Expect only positive things. Know that you can change every situation around to your advantage by using words consistently and over a period of time. This is not immediate, but if you stay with it, that fixes everything. It's that simple. Your parents messed you up. You can't fix it unless you start to learn to speak positively. That's a very simple formula to live by.